I would like to introduce Vanessa Graf, who is a writer and visual artist. She is doing her PhD in media ecology, and she's working at the intersection of new technologies, culture and ecology. She came over to Warsaw via train, I think, as the only person from abroad. And she has been to Poland already, joined us for a short period residency. And during that time she traveled through Warsaw west side of Poland and the coast, north side of Poland, the coast near the Baltic Sea. She was tracking the visual sides of the internet and cloud of Poland. As the result, she prepared for us this little booklet, artistic book, called Material Internet Field Kit that we have published both in Polish and English. And they are available to you for free over here and at our exhibition upstairs. Now we will have a speech by her that will show you a little bit of the background of how this zine was created.
Yeah, thanks. Also, thank you for bearing with me through these technical issues. I've been working on this cloud thing for about 2 years now, and I've never given a single presentation where everything went well. It's really ironic since, I'm supposed to be talking very expertly about the internet and nothing ever works. But yeah, today I will also talk about these infrastructures, hopefully from now on uninterrupted. So thank you very much for the interruption and to all of you for being here. I did this, different computer. Must remember to push both buttons. So yeah, as Eva mentioned, I was here in the spring of 2022 and I went on this sort of residency or prolonged field trip. Louder? Oh, okay. So just, if you don't hear me, feel free to shout at me. Actually, I got used to Polish men shouting at me during this residency because data centers are very protected, and so what usually happened was that some guy in security uniform came running outside shouting something I didn't understand, so don't worry about it. So I made this field kit about Warsaw, but really about a little bit more than Warsaw. We started in this city and then we went up to the north, to the coast, to Gdansk and back down here to try and understand how the internet looks like in Poland and how it is made visible, how it is often also made invisible. So to explore these invisibilities along the way. And before I show you, before I guide you a little bit through this work, I want to give you a little bit of the background, why I think this is important, how we deal with infrastructures, how these visibilities are somehow representative of the politics behind these structures. I also want to share some tools with you and, obviously some stories from the residency. So, as you know, and as was also talked about in the talk before, there is this idea that the internet or digitality is somehow immaterial. There's this very strong rhetoric of immateriality, and this perfect example of this is this metaphor of the cloud, right? It's so perfect, it's floating around somewhere, you can't touch it, it's somehow you try to touch it and it's just some little water specks in the air. But of course, as you also all know, this cloud doesn't reflect the material realities and connected with this, the social and ecological implications that this infrastructure brings with it. I really love this quote here by Case Major Natalie, where she says, and this is the last sentence if you want to read along, "The trope of immateriality assumes that digital stuff is weightless, supplied by unlimited resources and immune to decay." This, of course, to a certain extent is very normal for infrastructures. After all, they are infra something. They're designed to somehow fade out of view, run in the background. There's this very famous dictum made popular by many writers. One in particular is Susan Lee Starr. Maybe you've read some of her work, where she writes that infrastructure is the thing that only becomes visible when it breaks down. You only notice it when it doesn't work anymore. And this is a very common idea. Infrastructure is supposed to run smoothly, But still with this cloud or this digital infrastructure, you see a little bit of a difference to earlier infrastructures. They are, like if you compare it, for example, to a beautiful train station or these electricity poles of the last century with intricate designs, or like water infrastructure, you often had these very beautiful aqueducts which were like really impressive. So infrastructure is not only something that is supposed to run smoothly, but it in the past was often also something that was supposed to tell a story of state power, of influence, of wealth also, of a nation or of a kingdom. Oh, thank you for turning this off. It actually sounds like in a data center in here. It's always these fans also. But with the cloud, you don't have that. You don't have these beautifully designed buildings, mostly. Some of them are, we will see later. But mostly they look like these gray warehouses that are really designed to fade into the background. And then also you have this weird metaphor around it, right? And all of this talk of some, like the digital being something, that doesn't use resources. It's endless, you cannot touch it. And the cloud, of course, this beautiful word that I love. But also in the 90s we had the information superhighway, which was maybe a bit closer to other infrastructures, but always this collapse of distance and time also somehow. So we begin to see some of the differences to other infrastructures. What we can all agree on is that there are infrastructures behind this cloud, and I'm obviously not the first one to notice this. There's a long history in writers, journalists, artists engaging with this idea and following these routes. One of the most famous was Neil Stephenson, who, I think this was in the 90s, wrote this article in Wired, Mother Earth, Motherboard, and he coined the term hacker tourism, and he followed along the site of one of the first submarine cables that was being built at the time. This became really famous. This became really critiqued afterwards, but this is kind of like the Mother article, what got this all started. And I said that I wanted to share some resources for you, so if you want to get into this kind of stuff, these kind of articles, like something really low-key is this journalist Andrew Bloom, who wrote this very nice story about visiting the internet himself also, so if you want to not to dive too deep, but get an impression. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not, come on, you have to tell me when I forget to press the right computer's button. So the one on the left is the one I told you about before, and then Andrew Bloom, the journalist, is the one who wrote Tubes. For more academic discussions, I recommend A Prehistory of the Cloud, which goes into the metaphor bit, or The Undersea Network, really great book by Nicole Staruzielski, who follows along also these sites of infrastructure, but talks to the people who make it work. She conducts anthropological interviews with them and kind of tells how this network, as Joanna also pointed out before, is not only a network made up of computers, but actually, of course, a network also of people. And if you want to get really specific, you can also read textbooks like this internet infrastructure one, and you will also learn how to set up a server. And it will tell you about lots of other metaphors that are used in networking and computing, but that didn't make it that didn't become as popular as the cloud. So, still what is being repeated in all of these books, I mean all of these books, except maybe let's put the textbook aside a little bit, because this is really meant in a university context to teach how to build up these, or to set up these networks. But all of these books, they acknowledge that there is this metaphor of, let's say, the cloud or immateriality, but there's infrastructure underneath it, right? But what they also do is they kind of perpetuate the idea that this infrastructure is hidden out of view, out of sight. Which I think is a different kind, it's a second kind of hiding of this infrastructure, because it's not that hidden after all. And this is what I'm here to show you today, or this is what I experienced also when traveling through Warsaw, and also when conducting my own research, which is about these digital infrastructures in the Alps. So how to go about finding these infrastructures? The first thing you can do, all of those who have a computer, can do this traceroute command in their terminal, or whatever the Windows equivalent of this is, I don't know. You can type in traceroute and an address that you want your computer to look up, and then it will tell you how many hops it takes to get there, and it will give you the IP addresses of the places where it went in between, to put it very simply. If you're a network engineer, please do not come at me. This is not the place for like really correct explanations, but basically this is what's happening here. As you can see, I did this last night or 2 nights ago at my hotel here over there. And I went to google.com, which took 9 hops, and it actually, like, you can take these IP addresses and then you can look them up online. Where they are located, some of them are private, like the starting IP address is my hotel's IP addresses, if you're interested. This is private. But then for Google, it showed me that actually it was going to some server in California. And then I went to the Biennale website also. By the way, I interrupted the first traceroute attempt because I was impatient, just if you're wondering. But then the second I was more patient, I let run. So I went to this Biennale website, which took 12 hops, and it went to some servers in Poland, which I later Googled, and also to Frankfurt. So this is one thing you can do very easily. But it doesn't tell you much, right? It tells if you're interested in how these infrastructures look. It tells you where, like, these hops are going, but it doesn't really tell you more than that. I mean, it didn't tell me more of what I was interested in, to be more precise on this point. So there's another thing you can do. There's a lot of these mapping resources online that you can check out. One very helpful company or research institute is Telegeography. They have this submarine cable map online, for example, also a map of internet exchanges, a bunch of other maps. They also produce these beautiful print products, very expensive. I have not bought one, but if someone wants to sponsor this for me, you know where I am. I don't know, they're very beautiful, huge maps, and you can get some impression of where this internet is happening. And there's tons of these mapping resources out there, like you can just look them up. Usually most countries, most states will have state-backed maps of these infrastructures. You just have to do a little digging, but it's not very hard to find out with some Google searches or other search engines of your choice. But the one that I like to use the most is this map by Infrapedia. If you just go to infrapedia.com, you will be presented with something like this or similar, and this gives you a very basic overview of the biggest cable routes, like the backbone routes. It doesn't show you like where the individual houses are connected, but it shows you the main connections. It gives you some submarine connections as well, and some of the data centers. I am assuming that not all of the data centers that exist are listed on here, but it's a very good starting point, and this is what I often use when going around and trying to figure out where things are or how I can contact them. Now, this is what I use to figure out kind of from where to go. I'm not so much interested in mapping these infrastructures. As you can see, this work is already being done, and it's also, I feel like, kind of weird to go somewhere from another country and then come there and be like, wow, I discovered all these data centers and they're here on a map. Kind of has a little weird taste. So I'm not too interested in doing that, but I use it as like my base information to figure out where to go from there. Yeah. So what I'm mainly interested in is how these infrastructures look like in their form, in their communication, also in their marketing. And I want to spend a little bit of time talking about why I'm interested in this. Infrastructures are really large-scale investments. They're very expensive, and so whenever a new infrastructure is being built, the people who are investing in this infrastructure have to do a lot of hard thinking. How this will hold up, because it's not something that you build and then 2 years later you can just replace it. It's something that is built to stand the test of many, many, many years. And so, as Brian Larkin here writes, who's a really, first of all, famous and second of all, great writer, scientist, he writes that these infrastructures have store within them forms of desire and fantasy. So imagine you want to build a train system, so you have to think about how this will look like maybe in 100 years, how will it look like in 150 years, or maybe in 20. Let's think about how it will look like in 20 years. Anyway, you have to somehow project yourself into the future, right, to imagine the state in the future, imagine the people using it in the future. And the same, of course, goes for digital infrastructures. And so this is what's really interesting in me. What kind of desires, what kind of fantasies are stored in these infrastructures? And one way that these desires and fantasies are expressed is through the form that these infrastructures take. He calls this the poetics of infrastructure. And he says that this poetics of infrastructure is very revealing of the politics behind this infrastructure. So the poetic or the aesthetic aspect, which includes the visual appearance, but also like the way it's communicated, the way it's imagined, the way it's conceptualized even. This is a means of enforcing the political behind it. And this is a political that is somehow very longue durée, it's long-standing, it's really protected into the future, it's really telling something about the state or the institution or the company making this investment. And so this is exactly why I'm so interested in how these infrastructures are conceptualized, visualized, communicated, and shown in the world. And I think even though the internet, or let's say the digital, is such a global phenomenon, it's really revelatory how this manifests in local kind of pockets. So you get a little bit of local flavor and you start to understand something about the context that they were built in. And that was fascinating to me because, of course, you think, the cloud, it's the same everywhere, but of course it's not. And so that was the theoretical starting point kind of for this zine that I made here. I want to show you a few examples just to kind of get this idea across of this poetic and the political. And these are examples I basically almost always use, but I think they hold up really well. Because what Brian Larkin says is that these poetics, they don't just come to, or the form, it doesn't just come to the foreground when the infrastructure breaks down. It's always there, it's always highly curated in a way. It's very chosen how an infrastructure appears. And this might be, it might be chosen to kind of fade into the background, or it might not be. Anyway, it's something that's very, like a line that is very finely played with. And so an example where Google is actually showing and presenting proudly their infrastructures is this data center mural project that they did. They invited 4 artists to create huge murals on 4 of their data centers in the US. The murals reflected somehow the local community and the activities that the locals do in these areas, so to really highlight these structures that are usually built to be more forgotten. So this is an example of where this idea of an infrastructure only becoming visible when it breaks down doesn't really hold up. Then below you see, let's start with the one on the right. I really love this one. It's a data center close to where I live in Austria, and it's not only a warehouse, it's a warehouse covered in mirrors. So when you look at it, you're supposed to only see a sky. It's genius. It's really the closest you can get to invisibility, I think. Except for, of course, not building a data center, which I think would be an idea, but like it's not very popular in the circles that I travel around in. And then to the left, I'm still on the right slide, is this Polish data center that we visited actually on a trip. It's in Poznan, and it's so impressive. It has this beautifully designed facade, and you can see this from the highway even. This is the complete opposite. It's very imposing, and the logo is huge, and you are supposed to notice this when you drive by. Also, they give tours, so this is why those are the only ones that I'm naming, like really naming. The others I want to respect their anonymity and also their kindness for showing us around, but this data center is a place you can visit. So actually I recommend doing that, it's very interesting. And so these are the kind of nuances that we're moving in between. And I think you can't, like faced with this, and also when reading Brian Larkin that I showed you before, you can't really say anymore that the infrastructure only becomes visible when it breaks down. Instead, it's this very active choice of what to make visible and what to kind of try not to make visible. So I think it's not a politics of forgetting or making people forget, like it's often written about, but it's more that something that is like selectively highlighting and showing you the parts that they want you to see. Of course, and this also works, of course, with the metaphors. Like the cloud, it's not a useless metaphor, it's actually a really great metaphor. But of course, as with all metaphors, it obscures some things, a lot of things I would say, while it highlights other things that are not bad or not true, but it's just selective, you know? Now, from all of this, I finally get to Warsaw. I mean, I teased it a little bit with this beyond PL already. So we're now taking the step and going into like what is happening in Poland and how does it look like. And I will be using some of the images from the trip and also some of the things, let's say things that I created for the zine that you can, like, you're free to take one with you later. here you can see 3 maps of Warsaw. The one on the left is in the south and close to the airport. The one in the middle is one of the center, so here actually. Oh, I see where we are. I will not pronounce the street name. And then the one on the right is the river with 5 bridges, which are the 5 points also where in Warsaw, at least the cables are crossing this river. And I want to spend a little bit of time to talk about this central map, or the center area in which we're in, because this is also the heart of Warsaw's internet, and also where Poland's internet kind of started in the 90s, which is comparably a bit late, I would say. I mean, no judgment, but it was just like it started in the 90s here, and it started close to the train station, which is over there. I'm pointing in the right direction, right? Yes, great. And this is very, I would say, a common thing that happens, because newer infrastructure always follows older infrastructure. In the case of digital infrastructure, it's very easy for that. Like, you have to lay a lot of cables, so you have to, for example, gain a lot of the right of land or passage, I guess it's called. And so if you just follow a train, a train line, it's easy because someone else already negotiated that for you. And also, this is what happened here. So they started this first internet connection. It was told to me that it was some genius businessman who started this internet connection in this building where today is the Lim Center or Marriott Hotel. And you can still see it's a very important internet place because of this giant antenna it has on top. And it's one of these buildings here marked in orange. And that's where the first connections happened, and that's really still where the center is. And then from here, I mean, in Warsaw, we also went to visit a data center in the south, and also one to the east of here, to the east of the river also. But then after Warsaw, we went to Poznan, and then up north to the coast to Kolobrzeg. Yes, Mielno, and then Gdansk, which I know I'm not pronouncing right. I tried. And then back down to Płock, and then back down here. So we made kind of this loop. And one of the things that struck me the most right in the beginning was that the internet isn't invisible here at all. I've never experienced this in any other place. But here, really, everywhere you go, like I followed these mappings that I showed you before, the Infopedia map, for example, I followed the backbone cable pathways. And it's written everywhere. If you look to the ground, you will see these manhole covers or like service access things where you can access the pipes and cable passages down below, and they're all marked with these telecommunication companies. It's actually kind of almost too easy to follow, but I was so excited and enthusiastic about it. It was the first time I had seen it. And then later I started seeing those things also in other cities in Europe, but only because I knew that I could actually look for them. They're never as abundant as they are here. So actually, if you go outside there and then go a bit in this direction, there's one right there. It's really easy to find. I was very happy about this, and then also puzzled by the fact that there were none of these little maps to show you where they are, because I'm used to these ground cover things being for things like water or gas or something like this, and then usually what comes with them are these little maps that I'm sure you've seen before. So it usually tells you, for example, there's gas, you have to walk 11.7 meters behind you, and then 11.4 meters to the left, and then you will find where this opening is for service access. And these internet or digital cable covers, let's say, weren't mapped. And the one that you can see on the right is just my speculative interpretation of how much easier my work would be if they were mapped. Like if you did have a little internet map, but this doesn't exist here. Maybe it exists somewhere. And unfortunately, I couldn't find anyone who could explain this to me. There were some speculations, but I couldn't find anyone to confirm my suspicions. So that's just what I leave you with. Maybe some of you in the audience know that. I'm more than happy to learn. But this is basically the route that I followed, and that I found a lot of these cable covers, which is right around the corner from here. So it was fascinating for me to see that not only, of course, is the cloud not a cloud, but it's also not infrastructure that is deliberately being made invisible. Quite the opposite, it's right there, you just have to know where to look for it. And so I thought maybe it comes down more to like the idea of literacy, knowing how to read these things. And then you can see on this map, which is very zoomed in comparison to the one we've seen before, that there are also these blue dots, right? And you were asked before where the closest data center is, and then these cheaters in this corner said Orange Polska, because of course they knew. And that was really unfair to the rest of you. But yeah, so the nearest data centers are just over there. There's also, like in this LIM center, for example, there's a lot of telecommunication companies in general. You can also spot these data centers when walking around. It's a bit harder than the very easy manhole covers or ground covers. But the one thing that you will always find, always, I guarantee you, if you do not, send me a picture. I will be very interested in this, but you will always find, I swear, security cameras watching you. You will always find this digital infrastructure watching you back. And this is like the least difficult thing that will happen, because the next level, which also always happens, is like some security guard being very annoyed at you, even though it's completely public property. It's okay to walk past these buildings, it's even okay to take pictures, but they will try to discourage you from doing that. And another thing that you will always find, this one is a bit harder, because you will find them anywhere, are these the antennas that are used for mobile internet. Of course, they're not only on data centers, but they tend to be around data centers, on top of data centers a lot more than usual, I would say. But then this doesn't always have to be the case. One thing that I forgot to take a picture of that's also very indicative of a data center is that you see the cooling exhausts, the things for cooling on top of the buildings or next to the buildings. Because data centers, the inside, in the end, it's very boring. It's always the same. It's really always the same. Like, you go in and there are a lot of computers, servers. They are they're blinking with lights. There's a lot of cables. They're housed in server racks, which are aligned in these rows. The server racks also always look the same. The sound is always the same. There's a lot of noise. It's a lot of fans trying to cool all of these servers. There's a fire extinguishing system, which works usually with gas, because you don't want to put water on a computer. There are emergency batteries. There are these ship generators that jump in case the power goes out for more than 15 minutes, which is what the small ones can take. And then you will also probably notice that everything is doubled. Everything is made redundant. Usually they have, like, they say this is DC1 and this is DC2, data center 1 and data center 2, and it's just two adjacent rooms, and you think like, oh, I thought a data center was like one building, but no. It's and they also use separate circuits of electricity, so you will often meet people who will tell you, for example, the one supply of electricity comes from this side of the city, and then that from the other side of the city. It's really, it grows large circles around it. But yeah, from the outside they're very similar, and so they're very, from the inside, from the logic, they're very similar. And so you will probably also find these cooling things outside, so you will be able to maybe spot them. We were then invited to go visit some of these data centers, which is, I had visited some before, but then we also visited some here, which is how I know how they look inside. Also, you can Google this, but it's more fun, to go and check. And to have this stuff explained to you. And so so we got to talk to the people, mostly data center managers. And what you can see here is one page out of this zine, because in the zine what I'm doing is I'm kind of telling this story, but I'm telling the story as a sort of mythology, which I will come back to a little bit later. But I'm recounting these experiences that we had and the things that we've noticed or found out or were told. And so one of the things that was most striking in this beginning of the trip in Warsaw and then also Poznan was that there was a lot of talk about water. Of course, talking about the cloud is always somehow talking about water, but then here it was kind of water in a different state. Like there was a lot of talk about this stream from Warsaw to the west, which was very important. And if you know anything about internet infrastructure in Europe, it's that the center, the most important place to be is Frankfurt and Amsterdam and London. So we want to really go up to that direction. And like many of the people that we talked to positioned their data centers as being somehow bridges from the east to the west and to establishing this connection, also to having this very fast data stream, which is important for fields like banking, for example, or like high frequency trading really relies on short distances, like much more on distance than you would maybe think, or I thought, because everything is in the cloud, so it doesn't matter where the cloud is located, but it really does matter because you lose a lot of money apparently when your algorithm is farther away. And anyway, so in what we noticed in Warsaw was this kind of stream, right? Or in Poland in general, the stream from west to east, super important. Also bridging function, again, water. And then we went up north, which to me was one of the things I was looking forward to the most because I'm from Austria and we don't have any coast. And so I'm, of course, double fascinated by submarine cables because I can't access them from where I live. Also, it turns out that I cannot access them from going to the coast because they're very hard to find. But we wanted to try anyways. None of the people we reached out to talk to more about this were willing or able to talk to us about these cable landings, so we kind of really had to rely on trying to go there, and also what I knew before, which is that usually these cable landings, you will not see anything, the cables are in the ocean and then they're buried. But then you're supposed to find a little hut, at least somewhere in the area, which we didn't. We really tried to look very hard for this, but we only found water and sand, and this was at one point before my presentation got changed, this was some video, but you can imagine water moving, okay? And we really looked hard for these things, and sometimes we thought we found something, like this thing on the right, but it turned out to be some outlet for water or something. Anyway, very disappointing. Really, everything we saw was just sand and dunes, and it was very pretty. It was very cold also, but it was nothing. There was no internet. There was no internet on the beach. Some people looked extra hard, and we really tried to look everywhere, but it was really impossible to find out anything until the moment when we went to one part of the beach where we knew from the maps that we had that there should be a cable landing here, and what we found were, of course, a lot of security cameras. So that was the closest that we got to. We are 110% sure it was a cable landing, right? Because we really wanted it to be a cable landing. So it has to be one. But yeah, it was really hard to find. And sometimes we were looking for nothing in particular and then happened across actually something, which happened here. For example, we came across this company installing the last mile, or the wiring up the individual houses. So a lot of the ground was open and you had all these cables lying around, which of course for a cable enthusiast is very exciting. Probably everyone else would have been very bored, but luckily we were all cable enthusiasts. And then we found this, when you walk around, you see all of these boxes in the street, and they are housing some mysterious electrical things. One was open, or easily openable, let's say like this. And we saw this connecting station where all of the individual addresses were lined up. Actually, we don't know whether this was for electricity or for telecommunications specifically, but since the housing was of some telecommunications company, again, we were quite sure we had found the cloud. We went to visit also a data center in Gdansk and had some more conversations up in the north, and we found out that the north-south connection in Poland is something that doesn't have a lot of weight, let's put it like this. The data center manager told us that they are an island in Poland, and they're more providing the service locally. This was very interesting to me also because, of course, I'm always comparing what I find to what I see in Austria and in Switzerland. And in these countries, the focus is a lot on service and on proximity to the client. It's very expensive to build a data center in Austria and Switzerland, but you have great energy supply with the Alps. But then the focus in the marketing speech, or what I'm presented with, is always like, we're so close to the client, they can always come over, check something in the server if something isn't working, and we provide a service. And this reminded me a little bit of this Gdansk data center manager, because they told us that, yeah, Gdansk is really like, this is not important for any international clients, but we're an island here, but we provide for the island, somehow along these lines. While the rest of the data centers on the stream line were talking about entirely different things. They talked a lot about Poland being a cheap place to build a data center, so it's great for business to put your data center here, having these short connections to Germany, which is really great, and attracting all of these big international clients, which of course they can never say who the clients are because it's secret. And then in the end, where we ended up going was Plock. Oh yeah, sometimes you look for stuff, but you just really go into nowhere. I'm sorry, I'm really using your pictures, but it's very funny. I thought it's very funny, my camera roll. But in the end, we ended up going to Plock, which is an oil city. And it's really in the middle of, well, it's in the middle of Poland. I was gonna say it's in the middle of nowhere, but that's not nice. No, it's in the middle of Poland, and there are no data centers, at least none of them are findable online, but it's somehow the biggest cable crossing in all of Poland. This is really where all of the big names come together, and these are companies that you see having cables all across Europe, and not just that, they're really across the entire globe. And they're all coming together in this little Plock town, which is fascinating to visit, but somehow a bit quiet when you get there. And so the trip came to this very peaceful and quiet end where we somehow knew that we were looking at nothing, but at the same time we were looking somehow at everything. All of the data that passes through Poland probably goes somehow underneath our feet, since most of the biggest cable providers are here, and they're all meeting in this one place where there's also this oil thing. I'm not so good with oil infrastructures, I have to say. So in the end, I got back home and I had all of these ideas of water, right, and all of these stories that we encountered, and I made this zine in, well, I made it in English, but then it was translated also into Polish, and it kind of tells this counter mythology of, and it was important, yeah, of this trip. And it was important for me to position it also as this counter mythology, because this idea or the narrative of a cloud is really something that's somehow mythological to me. It's like one author described, Brian Larkin actually described it as being fetish, like something like it's a trope, it's a cult, it's a fetish. Like you find all of these words, it's a religion often also, which I love. And so I tried to, I don't own a data center, I don't work at a data center, I have no real way or weight of influencing these decisions or the way that it's communicated, but I do have the possibility to participate in this culture and in this narrative building and in this story building, in this imaginary shaping. And so this is what I try to do with the zine, different computer, which you can see some pages of here, and then more, of course, in the actual zine. And now what I would love to happen in the end is that I was so lucky and happy to have been invited by the Biennale to come here and to do this, and also to experience this together and to talk to all of these people and go to these places. But then in the end, whatever I can do is only a guest's kind of look into how this looks like here. I'm missing obviously much of the context. I don't speak Polish. It may help when security guards are shouting, but it really doesn't help in, for example, understanding the legal situation or the historical context. And so what I would actually love and what I think is needed is to be as open as possible about the information that I could gather, and to just offer to anyone who is interested, who is perhaps working on this, to pass this on. So if any one of you is working in this direction or knows someone who's working in this direction, I'm an open book, and would love, you can come to me anytime and tell me that I need to immediately give all of my information to, I don't know, this and that person. With this, I think I'm at the end. I thank you very much for your attention, and if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, Vanessa. Are there any questions? No. So, is there a way you could compare Warsaw with other European cities? Because there's a trend that's showing a lot of investment are currently happening in Warsaw in terms of data centers. And how do you see it from your perspective?
I can only speak about this very generally, because my research focus is usually very much away from cities. It's really in the rural areas of the Alps. The only cities I'm confronted with usually are Zurich and Innsbruck, with Zurich, Switzerland in general being the fifth best place apparently to build your data center. There's this data center ranking index. Sorry? Yeah, but the latest information I had was that Switzerland is a good place to build your, even though it's very expensive. But so I don't have any comparisons from cities. What I can tell you generally is that infrastructure follows infrastructure. Data centers follow cities. And usually you see the old power structures replicated in the way that new infrastructure is being built. You see this, for example, in the way that which cities are the most important in terms of internet infrastructure in Europe. It's not Warsaw, it's not Belgrade, it's not Madrid. It's of course it's London, where the first link across the Atlantic was also made, and then it's Amsterdam and Frankfurt. So you see these very classical centers of power. You see, they're in the West, and so you see this replicated a lot. Other than that, I think it would be interesting to talk to people who know more about Eastern European cities in general, I think. Yeah, I'm sorry to stay so general on this.
Why Poland is your focus of your thesis? Maybe perhaps something different than the cost, in contrast to the other European countries, in terms of, I don't know, a scholarship or something else?
Yeah. Poland, because I was specifically invited by the team of the Biennale to come here to do this project, and my thesis focuses on the Alps, so it's in Switzerland and in Austria, which is where I come from, and also a very precarious natural environment. So I was interested in understanding how you can build this new infrastructure while at the same time living in this precarious natural situation. Yeah.
Just to add that the work prepared by Vanessa is one of the works commissioned by Biennale, especially for the second edition, because we knew the work from Linz that she prepared, and we were wondering if she would like to do something similar for Warsaw.
Yeah, so again, I want to really emphasize that it's a guest's position. It's really not an insider's position. I think that's really important to mention. Yeah.
Thank you for your time. And in case of your story about the guards, I'm really surprised by the level of safety, or rather to say unsafety. And when you have this comparison to Austria and Switzerland, what do you think about strategic safety in case of sabotage or something like that? I guess that maybe it would be better to ask someone from the defense ministry, something like that. But still, you as an observer and researcher, you have this comparison. So I'm really curious, what about, the surveillance? That's one case, but also, the kind of poetic of fences and all this landscape and this access to really important places with our data. Thank you.
Well, digital infrastructure in general falls under the category of critical infrastructure, and so especially some of them more than others are very, very protected, and also have deals, for example, in case of a what's it called, like when the electricity, a blackout, to be supplied, for example, with emergency electricity, or to have oil supply or like diesel supply for the generators that comes directly from military resources. The degree of this varies depending on who the clients are in the particular data center. And so security measures in data centers are always insanely high, no matter where you go. Most of the time they will at least have so everywhere you have to register, there you go, where you go, they will scan your fingerprints in most of the cases. A lot of the time they have retina scanners. So all of these measures are in place. What happened to me in the Alps is usually that these places that don't want visitors simply don't answer and really block everything or say no. But I've never encountered security guards in the Alps. But I have to say it's a possibility that they also exist, since obviously I haven't visited everywhere. In Poland, I was surprised to find so many guards, because also, you have to pay the person, so it's interesting. But what was the most surprising to me was that this one data center actually not only had guards, but they had a double door for cars to first pass through the first door, close the door, like a gate, and then open the second gate to really have this extra security. And then they didn't only have guards, men of course, but they also had, they had the airport check thing scanning you, but they also had guns. And that was very intense for me. Some people didn't notice that they had guns, but I was very scared. In terms of how much sense this makes to protect the data centers, I've always wondered about this as well. It seems to me that a lot of it is, how to say this, client service. In a way that a TV show would do fan service, but just to reassure the clients that it's really, really, really secure. Because I think at a certain level, at least this is what it seems to me from the outside, these security measures, they don't add any more security at a certain level. Yeah, but then what's also important to keep in mind is that they don't only have these physical barriers of entry, but a really big danger is also getting the data stolen in some other way, like being hacked, etc. So, and the way that these, the degree of these security measures is somehow related to how they are viewed as critical infrastructures, which is dependent again on the kind of client that they have. So if you store government data, you will be very protected. If you store bank data, you will be very protected. It's also, you can do some reverse engineering. The more protected data centers, you can start to speculate, who are they housing here? Why is this so insane? Why does this man have a gun? Yeah.
Hi, I was wondering, have you seen any interesting examples of infrastructure in new cities? So in Saudi Arabia, they've got all these plans of these new smart cities. And I wondered, how does all of this digital infrastructure look? Or how do they kind of approach it? Or how is it sort of visualized? If you've seen any.
Yeah, I'm sorry to have to say no. I really have no experience or knowledge on this subject.
Hi, I was wondering about the submarine cables going from Denmark to Kołobrzeg, Mielno, and I saw that on the map they weren't really connected to like the main grid, so I assume there's some connection, or that was like for local use, or could you like elaborate on that?
Yeah, I can actually go back to this slide maybe, or maybe to the overview also. So this map is incomplete. Also, by the way, the title of my talk, an incomplete. Yeah, anyway, so this map is incomplete. It doesn't show all the cables. It shows the main cables, the backbone cables, and I assume it shows as much as they know or as much as they're able to publish. But what actually, how the grid, so to say, actually looks like is it's way smaller, and like, you know, every house is cabled up, and then this goes to, like, you probably have a computer with a wireless router, which has a cable, I assume, and this cable goes into your socket, and then there's a cable that goes to your internet service provider, and then they have a cable that goes to the next switch or hub. And so you have a lot more cables than what you can see here. So it seems like these are disconnected, but they are, they're insanely connected. But yeah, it seems like they're not connected to any of these main lines, which is actually something I was wondering about as well. I thought, like, why go through all of the effort to make these submarine cables, but the north-south axis is really not important at all, seemingly. Unfortunately, all the people I wanted to talk to about this didn't respond or were not happy to talk to me.
You said about infrastructure following infrastructure, so I was wondering about what do you think about the company that was trying to build a data center up north or North Pole or something like that? Does it make any sense to have a data center so far nowhere?
Well, the biggest consideration when building a new data center is energy costs, right? And most of the energy is used for cooling. So to answer your question in a way that I personally do not agree with, from this perspective, it would be economically perhaps not the worst idea. And also you have this phenomenon of like the first investment is the biggest, right? So if, say, someone, please don't do this at home, were to build a data center somewhere very high up north and would make this initial investment, have these lower cooling costs because you can use the advantages of the surroundings, I'm sure many would follow, and then you wouldn't have the problem of not being connected anymore. But then we have to talk about, of course, the ecological costs of this. Does it even make sense? Half of these data centers, I think we also have to have the discussion, not about does it make sense to build it here, but does it make sense to build it at all? And maybe one last point in the direction of this, Iceland is one of the also best places to build the data centers because they can take advantage of the natural cool climate and political stability. It's like I learned this by heart. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think we will stop here. Maybe it was a good closing remark. If building a new data center has got any sense, so the next presentation after the break will maybe break the rule of building standard data center and will open up the possibility to look for another resources of storage data. So we will start in 15 minutes. Thank you very much, Vanessa.
Thank you.
Thank you.